Hello, my name is Lydia Plowman. I'm an Associate Director at the Scottish Graduate School for Social Science, and part of my remit includes interdisciplinarity. And so what I'm planning to do today is to take you through some slides on applying for a studentship under the interdisciplinary steer, which is funded by ESRC. There's a couple of things to mention here. One is that I'm not focusing on other aspects of putting together a quality application, and the other is that this is a two-stage process with an expression of interest followed by the full proposal. Some of the points I'm going to talk about are only really relevant for the full proposal, but I think it's still worth knowing about them at the stage when you write the expression of interest. So I'm going to put the slides up now and take you through those. So I'm going to explain what ESRC means by interdisciplinary and what the steer itself is. Then just show you quickly some of a list of the studentships that are currently funded, and then take you through some points on writing your proposal and the assessment process. So ESRC refers to a steer, meaning funding which is directed to specific areas, and in this case it's for interdisciplinary studentships. They also have steers for advanced quantitative methods and for data sets, and we have 4 interdisciplinary studentships available under this steer to award each year, and these are supervisor-led. What that means is that the proposal for the studentship is submitted by the supervisor, not by the student, which is how it works in the open competition. And typically each student will have one supervisor who's a social scientist who works alongside a supervisor who works within the remit of another research council. And it's important to be aware that there's quite a lot of guidance available on the SGSS website at the URL here, which it's advisable to look at. So what does interdisciplinary mean? I'm going to labour this a bit in this session because the weak point of the proposals that we can't fund, even though they might be really strong in other regards, is often around the understanding of interdisciplinarity and how that is conveyed to us. So from ESRC's point of view, their definition is very specific, and what they're looking for is programs of work where at least 50% of the work comes under social science, but not more than 2/3 of it. So between a half and a third of the program of work would fall under the remit of one or more other research councils. Now, in the social sciences, we often tend to use the word interdisciplinary to mean connections between different disciplines within the social sciences. So, for example, a collaboration between an economist and a sociologist does not count as interdisciplinary in this particular context, because both economics and sociology are social sciences covered by ESRC. Another example might be education and social anthropology, or politics and human geography. So in these cases, they're not deemed to be interdisciplinary because they fall within the remit of ESRC. Some subjects, such as psychology or linguistics, can straddle research councils depending on their specific disciplinary orientation. So it's important to check on this if you're unsure. ESRC's aim is that the blend of disciplines is transformative rather than simply bringing new perspectives. Taken holistically, the whole doctoral research project needs to be greater than the total of its parts. This is likely to mean that the project will be innovative, it may be curiosity driven, and it will aim to open up new research areas. Now, what I'm doing here is just running through some of the studentships that have been awarded over the last few years to give you a flavour of the range of projects. There's more detail on some of the exemplar projects in the guidance for this competition. If you have any questions about eligibility, then do check with the SGSSS team. Note that when the panel makes its funding decisions, there is no allocation for specific research councils, specific pathways, or particular HEIs. The overriding criterion is quality, as long as the STEER criteria have been met. In this case, we can see that one of the studentships crosses the remit of 3 research councils, ESRC, MRC, and EPSRC. This is acceptable and it may be desirable in some cases, but do be wary of expecting a student to cover too much in one project. You'll need to be able to assure us on this point. You'll also need to be careful that the social science component of the doctoral research constitutes 1/2 as a minimum. There's another example of a 3-way research council split here. And the reason that there are 5 awarded in this year is that only 3 had gone forward in the previous year. You'll see that 2 of these studentships actually mention 4 research councils. I want to emphasize that this is atypical, and proposals that fit the remit of more than one other research council are not favoured. It all depends on the strength of the case that you put forward. But you also need to consider the supervisory team even more carefully when there are more areas of expertise are involved. This might mean that you need a 3rd member of the supervisory team who can offer discipline-specific guidance. Communications within the team and the allocation of responsibilities should be discussed in the full proposal. Not only will the supervisors align with different disciplinary areas, they may be based in different locations, faculties, or HEIs too. So all of this will need to be mentioned. So in terms of writing your application, first of all, the most important thing is to check on the ESRC disciplines to make sure that you're not making more than between 1/2 and 2/3 of the proposal ESRC based. And there's just there's a note there of the other research councils. So you will need to check the remit of the research council that you're interested in, and the disciplines that it covers. And while you're on those websites, it's also worth looking to see what their research priorities are, so that if you can make mention of those, you can show how your proposal aligns with those priorities. So clearly you need to be able to make a case for why the stated research problem needs an interdisciplinary approach. You'll need to touch on the added value that this will bring, whether you're interpreting interdisciplinarity in terms of methods, concepts, theories, bodies of literatures. Some will draw more on the other disciplines than others, so you need to be clear about that. You also need to think about its role at different stages, and to be wary of a simple sequential sequence where it starts with discipline A and then moves on to discipline B, rather than a true integration. You also will need to think about the training that's needed for the different discipline areas. You definitely won't be able to include all of this in the expression of interest, but being able to show some indication that you've thought about it will be helpful. You'll also need to tell us about the ways in which the research questions relate to the remits of the relevant research councils. So training is an important part of this, and you will need to be able to indicate how the interdisciplinary elements of the project will be met by meeting the training needs of the student. So as it says here, you'll need to think about the specific challenges that might be presented by this, your project, whether it will take longer for a student to get up to speed. They might need to learn to use new equipment, get familiar with new theories or a new body of literature, new methods, and so on. So do take this into account and adjust the timescale accordingly. You'll also need to think about the way in which training will be distributed across the two or more supervisors, and how the training will prepare the student to work across disciplinary boundaries. Indicate the range of opportunities that are available. Some of these will be in-house, capitalising on the different departmental bases of the supervisors. It might be brought in, and of course SGSS has a wide range of training available for students as well. I want to emphasise the need to be realistic too, because we have found that some of the proposals we've looked at in the past have been rather over-ambitious about what can be achieved in the space of 3 years. Don't forget that there is not extra time made available because it's an interdisciplinary project. You'll still be expected to encourage the student to complete within the 3 years, and you'll need to provide a detailed and convincing timetable of how you'll bring that about. I'm also saying this needs to be for a proposal for a PhD student, not for a research assistant, because we sometimes find that the proposals look more like a grant application for a research project that the supervisor wants to carry out, than a student-shaped project suitable for being completed within 3 years. You also need to think about the fact that a lot of interdisciplinary research is conducted by interdisciplinary teams rather than by an individual student. So you need to establish the feasibility of the project and balance the breadth and depth you want to achieve with completing within the 3-year target. It may also be more difficult to recruit students for interdisciplinary studentships because they may not have the suitable blend of disciplines in their background, or they may feel that they can't apply if they don't tick all the boxes. So telling us how you're going to go about recruitment is important as well. So just to emphasise, don't be over-ambitious about what can be achieved. This is not a standard research project, but a proposal for a studentship. We're looking for a well-rounded person at the end who is able to pursue different career pathways. And we recognise that balancing the requirement for interdisciplinarity, innovative approaches, and feasibility is difficult. I've also mentioned there that students will need to adhere to the disciplinary steer throughout the 3 years, so they won't be able to change direction so that the emphasis becomes squarely within one discipline. It will be important for ESRC that the interdisciplinarity is maintained. So as I mentioned, we start with an expression of interest, and this is just to remind you of what's involved. So the first part is on the key strengths of the supervisory team, including how they will contribute to ensuring that the student emerges with these enhanced interdisciplinary skills. And the second part asks you to describe the approach and how you meet the steer. Can I also point out that you will need to mention ethics, even though there won't be a lot of space available there on that form. The expressions of interest are reviewed by members of the SGSS Directorate, and then they're checked by someone external to that team to ensure that the steer criteria have been met. We also avoid reviewers considering applications from their own university. So 12 of the expressions of interest are then invited to go through to a full proposal, and of those 12, 4 will typically be selected for funding. So I'm not going to go through the requirements for the full proposal in detail here because there is guidance on the website, but just to emphasize the risk assessment element. So not only will you need to take account of the continuing impact of COVID-19, but also talk about other potential unanticipated events. And as I mentioned earlier, the strengths of the supervisory team and how they will meet the interdisciplinary requirements are an important part of this proposal. These full proposals go to 3 external peer reviewers, at least one of which will be assigned to cover the remit of the additional research council that the proposal is intended to cover. And then the final decisions are made at a panel meeting, which consists of members of the directorate, members of the Dean's Network, some expert reviewers, and 4 interdisciplinary steer studentships will be awarded. There's more information on this process and on others at our website, so do please take a look there, and if you have any questions, do get in touch with the team. Thank you for your attention, and the best of luck with applying for the interdisciplinary studentships. I'm looking forward to seeing some really great proposals.